Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hi, my name is Jeri. I'm an alcoholic. It's nice to be here. It's nice to be off the 405. Freeway from hell. I was driving here and I was thinking to myself, I never worry because I know eventually I'm going to get to the meeting. If I don't, I don't. Somebody else will share. But I always get worried for the secretaries because you were very conscientious and nice and persistent, and I appreciate that. But I always think the good thing about being active in Alcoholics Anonymous and making a commitment is you get to practice your third step a lot. But anyhow, I'm here to share with you in a general way what I used to be like, what happened, what I'm like now, and hopefully I'll do that. It's kind of nice to talk in a small meeting because I think to myself, you know, obviously people are here for recovery on a Friday night and on Halloween because that's as good a night as any to party. The people in the, costumes look like what I used to be like, and it's kind of fun. You're going to hear, in case you're new in Alcoholics Anonymous, you're going to hear a lot of people share with you, and they're going to have all different stories, First, I have to say, it was so funny. I've been sober through God's grace one day at a time for over 28 years, and there's absolutely no virtue, but I'm impressed too. I get the biggest kick out of it when I hear people get up on the podium and they go like this. I'm sure we've all heard it and seen it, and I know what they mean, but they get like real proud, and they go, I choose not to drink today. And I think to myself, big choice, insanity or death, Where's the virtue in it? And because I'm sober and active, it just means that I'm sicker than most and God keeps me very active. I speak a lot, and I get the privilege of going all over the country and meeting people in different groups. This month I'm going to beautiful downtown Omaha in Nevada. I think that's beyond, I'm not Nevada, Omaha, Nebraska in November, which I believe is a little bit beyond any lengths. But I like the people in the Midwest, and I go and I share. And no matter where I'm having the privilege of sharing at, there's two things that always come to my mind. I want to get this out of the way first when I talk in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And one is the second step in the 12 and 12. I really happen to enjoy that step because it talks about the alcoholic personality. And it's free. You can just read it. You don't have to go to a therapist, nothing. It talks about the outstanding personality trait, or a major personality trait of most alcoholics is defiance. So that's a nice way of saying I'm born with an up yours attitude. And I don't know about anybody else, but that's what I'm like. And it was so funny because I don't like to be told what to share about, what not to share about. First of all, I'm an alcoholic. I'm a full-fledged drunk. Jack Daniels was my drink of choice. But I drank and used in the 60s, and if you can remember them, you weren't there. And I've never met a pure alcoholic in the 60s that didn't take everything else known to man except somebody who didn't inhale, And I don't care about that, but my story is involved with a lot of other things because I was a pig. I drank like a pig, and I went to the bottom and I stayed there. But my first love is booze and always has been. But I share, my experience, strength, and hope. And what I wanted to share with you, you're going to hear many different stories, like people drank every day, and then eventually every night and every morning, and years later they drank up their job, and years later they drank up their home, and years later they drank up their health, and they went to jail and lost their business, and they went to hell in a handbasket, and they hit their bottom. I personally admire that type of drinking because it takes tremendous endurance to last that long. I can't share with you that. I'm the type of drunk who went to the bottom and just stayed there. I can't imagine working my way down. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous as I never had been, let alone I had not. And I'm grateful for that. I took the express train. One of my friends is Eddie Cochran, and I love him. He has about, I don't know, maybe 35, 40 years of sobriety by now. And he always talks about there's two types of drunks, the hummingbird and the elephant. And I was the hummingbird. I just burnt myself out. At the age of 20, I was through. Trust me. I believe for me, we don't quit drinking, we finish. I didn't quit, I finished. And it's like trying to be a big shot in Alcoholics Anonymous. I get a kick out of it when I visit and I talk places, and people go, oh my God, you speak, you travel, you go all over. And I look at them and I always think to myself, yeah, being a big shot in Alcoholics Anonymous is sort of like running for student body president of the local mental asylum. We don't have any. And this may offend you, but if you're new here tonight, welcome to the bottom. This is it. And the moment you get that, the better off you're going to be. Because there's only one way up when you're at the bottom, and that's up. That's up. I don't know about you, but I didn't think to myself growing up, I can't wait to go to, where are we, Westchester on Friday night and an AA meeting and drive there from Camarillo. That's not what I had in my agenda. The reason I show up is for one reason, is I want to stay sober and not drink, and it's part of the deal. I had very good role models in my recovery. I was very fortunate. I spent a lot of time with a guy named Chuck Chamberlain, Chuck C., and a lady named Alabama Carruthers. And she happened to be one of my sponsors. And she had to speak all over the place, and I used to have to schlep her all over because she didn't drive. And she thought that was a good trade-off. She was an old-timer sharing experience, strength, and hope, and I drove. And it was, because I learned good AA habits. Don't say no to an AA request, try to show up. And that's probably why I'm sober one day at a time. But I'm a typical little runaway teenage drunk story. I'm a valley girl. I grew up in the valley so many years ago, it was even nice. I'm old enough that I grew up when the valley, the San Fernando Valley, was an absolutely beautiful place. I grew up in a little tract home in Canoga Park after the war. It was right out of the 50s, like a little Ossie and Harriet household. My mother and father were beautiful people. My father was a salesman. My mother was beautiful, petite, well-dressed, and in those days by 9 a.m. you had your makeup on, pearls, and the house was immaculate. Trust me. That's the way my family lived, right out of Ossie and Harriet. There was only one little problem. They had a little drinky poo once in a while. You're going to have to forgive me. I got sober before we had issues. I'm going to take off my jacket and relax. When I got sober, we didn't have issues. We had character defects. Every time I went to my sponsor, he made me work on some damn character defect. I never heard the word issue until the last 5 or 10 years. And I'm grateful for me personally. So the reason why I'm sharing my story with you is, and about my parents, is that I don't blame my family or my parents for my drinking. I personally believe that I was just born. This is my story. I get to tell it. I personally believe that I was born an alcoholic. That's me, personally. And I was fortunate enough to be born in the household I was because I happened to love both my parents. They were good old-fashioned drunks. They were nice people, good values, hardworking. They just didn't think there was anything wrong with having their Christmas tree lights up in July, but they were up. They did the best they could. In those days, a health food diet was martini and lobster and steak, followed with a Kent cigarette. And they were fun people. And I never had terrific abuse or anything like that in my household. But growing up, I remember that old Ossie and Harriet, my mother would be at home, and my father would come home at night, and they'd drink a little martini, and have a little cracked crab because they had class, and a Manhattan. And about 9 o'clock at night, my mother's in the bathroom committing suicide. My grandmother's called over to the house, and someone's breaking down the door. They would turn into Virginia Woolf about 10, And that still doesn't have too much to do with my drinking. And, I don't have a lot of folks to blame, thank God for that. But I grew up in the valley, and I don't know about anybody else, but I had a hard time getting along with other people. I always felt different. Isn't that unique in AA? You know why I felt different? I am bodily and mentally different than my fellows. I used to think I was just an awkward, self-conscious nerd, like a little turdy person. I don't know about anyone else in this room, but I never knew what to say after hello. Did you? Where did that manuscript come from? I was perfectly comfortable if I was by myself. If I was climbing a tree, riding a horse, out with nature, painting, I was fine. Put me with other people, I was uncomfortable. And another thing I think about, I mentioned the two things I think about when I share in Alcoholics Anonymous. The other little thing I think when I look out at any group is the story that I love about W.C. Fields. He was an old comic in the 20s. He was one of us. I guess he was an old drunk with a red nose. His wiring showed. He smoked a cigar. And he was quite a character. And there was a story about him being hospitalized once, and a guy came up to him and he was reading the Bible. And a man looked at W.C. Fields and he says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm reading the Bible." And he said, "Yes, but what are you doing?" And he says, "I'm looking for loopholes." So I believe for me, in every room, every place I go, I'm going to be getting this. Oh yeah! And looking for the loophole. You're going to find it. In every meeting in Alcoholics Anonymous, we can listen for the similarities or we can listen for the differences. It doesn't really matter because we're going to listen for what we want to listen for. I don't really care. That's why I never get nervous when I share. And this may sound terrible, but the reason I don't care is that I don't really care if you want what I have. I would like to be liked, and that's fine, but if a newcomer, I don't care if they want what I have. All I care about is that they don't want what they have. And then there's a start. Then you might want what someone else has in life. I had to come here completely through. End of the line. And hopefully, if you're new here tonight, you're at that place. That's the only way I found for me I could make it. But anyhow, I grew up this typical Valley girl in this little tract home, and I always felt different because I came from a cross-cultured family. That's a nice way of saying that my mother was Mexican and Catholic, and my father is English and agnostic. And I thought my father didn't like Mexicans and Catholics. It was just the opposite. It was my Mexican relatives who didn't like Mexicans and Catholics. Because my family comes from the upper classes in Mexico. And if you've ever traveled, it's just like England or any country. In Mexico, you have two classes, period. My friend Angie Trejo, when she shares, she says there's two kinds of Mexican, fruit picking and non-fruit picking. And the upper classes are phenomenal snobs, and you're Castilian Spanish with French blood, and we don't know where the little Mexican Indian slipped in. And I grew up in this crazy household, and I had beautiful relatives. They were Latin, they spoke English, they spoke French. My grandfather, they spoke Spanish, and they were very sophisticated and charming, fun people. They were a lot of fun. They'd have dances and barbecues, and my relatives would go back and forth into both languages all the time. And I would have one grandmother where it was English with blue eyes, and then I'd have my Latin grandmother from Mexico, and one grandmother would look at me and say, "It's a shame I didn't speak Spanish," and the other one would look at me and say, "It's a shame I didn't have blue eyes," and I just knew it's a shame. But that's all I ever heard. So I would hate family get-togethers because they were happy. And they were drinking and dancing and laughing, and I would just sit there self-conscious, uncomfortable. I could not do the Latin dances. I didn't speak Spanish. I didn't socialize. I thought if I slept with one relative, the other one might be offended. I was totally self-obsessed. And this is at 11 and 12 years of age, right? And I was also real defiant, so I would always tell my father what to do with whatever he told me. I don't know about anyone in this room, but my parents had unreasonable demands on me. They expected me to get up in the morning. Oh, please. They expected me to go to school and stay there. My father expected to talk to me without me telling him what I thought about what he just said. I would get in my dad's face no matter what he said, particularly as a teenager. He was a loving man with a sweet spirit, but I couldn't stand it. I had to win every argument. I had to fight with them. My brothers would shut up and they would go to their room, not me. I had to get at that guy till I got him pissed off, so he would get so mad that he would hit me, and then I would laugh because I knew I had the son of a bitch then because he was guilty. Right? So one time I got in my dad's face and he got mad at me, and I said, "You know what? I'm moving out. I'm going to go live with my grandmother, Nanny Lou, the English one, because she understands me." She was one of us. She was an old flapper in the 20s, had a lot of money, and I used to love to go stay with her because she smoked Pall Mall cigarettes, with a big red lipstick all over them, tons of costume jewelries, and used to talk about when she had Bentleys and casinos, and she was just a wild character. She always worked for celebrities. She ran their apartment buildings because she was so refined, and she sounded like Tallulah Bankhead. So she was a hoot, and I wanted to go stay with her because I was not pressured to be a perfect young lady dressed for the country club. Whatever my bullshit was, I wanted to go stay with my grandmother. So I went and I stayed with her, right? In fact, she was once a member of AA for 5 years. She loved Alcoholics Anonymous. She just never went. So she just took Valiums and read Daily Word, but she loved AA. And in those days, it was the Valium maintenance. And I went and I stayed with her, and it was fun because she'd be gambling at night, playing poker. And in fact, my grandmother was arrested at the age of 69 for bookmaking. And I was so proud of her. I thought, now my dad will really be embarrassed. And I'm staying with my grandmother, and sure enough, she says to me one day, all the relatives are coming over, right? So here I go again. I thought, it's Thanksgiving, the family's coming over, I can't speak Spanish, can't do the Latin dances, it's hell. I hated family get-togethers. I'm in the kitchen with my grandmother, the relatives are in the living room, and she said, honey, I think I know what you might like. Why don't you have a little hot toddy? Why don't you have a little apple cider and bourbon? And I thought, why not? I'd had a Tom and Jeri eggnog at Christmas, right? I'm 12, I'm cool. I'm in the kitchen. I have this little bourbon and apple cider. They're in the living room. I have a drink, and I'm immediately 14. I had one more drink. I was worldly, articulate, and intelligent. Yes, I was. I had another drink in the kitchen, and I didn't give a damn what they did in the living room. Really didn't. I had another drink in the kitchen, and I too could speak Spanish. I had one more drink in that kitchen, and I personally went into the living room and taught my Latin relatives how to do the Mexican dances. It worked for me. And if you can relate to that, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. I used to love to go out and get drunk and become somebody. Loved it. I could have a drink and I was no longer afraid. I wasn't mad. I wasn't self-conscious. I knew what to say after hello. I personally loved drinking. Trust me. I knew on a gut level why Dorothy left Kansas. That's just the kind of person I am. And so did my grandmother. So I had fun there. And I moved back home, and to make a long story short, I'm living in Woodland Hills, which was that time a very nice neighborhood. We had a beautiful home up on the hill, above Pierce College. I was a Valley girl. I went to Taft High when it was brand new. We used to call it Snob High. I knew how to shop before we had malls. And I was having fun. I drank, I smoked grass. I read Shakespeare and Thoreau. I had a theater arts scholarship. I was a very arty-farty teenager. I wasn't studying, drama class. I was in theater. And I knew at the age of 18 I would be in New York working on off-Broadway because I was humble. That was my life script. There only was one problem. My father happened to have an affair with this woman and get her pregnant, and my mother wasn't thrilled. Understatement. And either was his company. So they sent him to West Covina. And this is in the 60s, and my father worked for Electrolux, which was a good Catholic Polish company, and they were not happy with their sales manager getting a customer pregnant. I'm sure my father just had one too many drinks, and God knows what was going on between the two of my parents. But the bottom line is my whole world turned to shit. That was it. I mean, we were sent to West Covina, and I'm a sophisticated Valley girl. I'm getting my hair done at Playmates. I'm drinking, smoking a little grass in the theater arts, and I'm not ready for West Covina. I'm still not. And why I have fun is when I share in West Covina, I tell them, and they agree. And in those days, it was a real cow pasture. But the truth of the matter is, I wanted out. I wanted out way before we moved to West Covina. I wanted freedom. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was. I wanted to party. I didn't want to be involved in all this insanity. The bottom line is, I wanted to party, period. So I set up a fight with my mother. It was her fault, and I ran away from home. Typical runaway story. The only thing is, a few weeks before I ran away from home, I was dancing at a club in Hollywood, at a place called Gazzari's, where our little valley kids would go with fake ID and we'd go dancing. And I met a real character there, a beautiful woman with wild hair, lots of makeup. And I remember her saying, "Oh, I love your Valley Girl outfit. If you're ever in trouble or want to come out and hang out and party, look me up. You know, we make instant friends." So I took down her name and her address and her phone number. So when I went hitchhiking from West Covina, splitting, I went to Hollywood. I was like maybe not even 16 years of age, and I was a perfect young lady. I really was. Yes, ma'am, how do you do? I dressed beautifully. I was a beautiful, nice young lady. That's how I left home. Trust me. And I hit Hollywood, and I go to this little apartment on Wilcox, and I knock on the door, and she opens the door up, and she has a glass of wine in her hand, a joint in the other. Place reeks of grass. There's a guy in bed, a poodle on the floor, and the place is a mess. And I think to myself, thank God I've arrived. Freedom at last. You know, I'm going to have fun. And we started going to all the different clubs, the different bars, hanging out, just partying. And it was wonderful. I'd have to be home. I'd have to show up. I loved it. I loved running away. I loved the freedom. And I thought I was very hip and very sophisticated, right? Because I always read things like Shakespeare and Thoreau. And I thought it was so worldly. I was so knowledgeable. I'm living with her 2 weeks before I realized she's a he. And the reason I'm bringing it up tonight, I was thinking about Halloween. And it was so funny because I was afraid she would think I was different. And her name was Angel. She danced at the Queen Mary. She was really fun and nice, and we went to all the clubs and all the bars. And then I eventually hitchhiked to San Francisco because I didn't want to be in Los Angeles. You know, when I share at a group like this, I have to be honest, I hope you don't take offense. When I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I looked like an alcoholic, trust me, because I'd had hepatitis for the third time. I was a dark shade of yellow because I was dying of cirrhosis of the liver. I had 14 felonies, and I looked like Rocky after he lost. That's how I came to you people. I did not have social graces because it's like my brother says, if you take a nice piece of cheesecake and put it in the refrigerator next to a pastrami sandwich, in the morning, it's going to smell like pastrami. I spent almost 5 years drinking and using in the Tenderloin of San Francisco and Fillmore and Hollywood. And by the time I came to you people, I did not have social graces. I was lucky I could breathe in and out. But when I come to a meeting like this, there's this thing in my head that is afraid to tell my story out of fear of being judged, you know, like the AA police. In some meetings, you do have that. You have somebody back there with the whistle. Oh my God, she cussed. Whoops, kick her out. Oh my God, she mentioned dope. Shoot her. Oh my God, they did what? And I know that that's not the case because I'm not in a PTA meeting. And like my friend says to me, who's in Al-Anon, people aren't sitting here doing the Al-Anon cha-cha-cha with the Al-Anon blue lip, like. But sometimes I get that fear because I'm so many years removed from my story. And it's like my friend Marie Stinner says, and she speaks all over, and she's a woman alcoholic, and she says she goes to meetings in some places in the United States, and she hears these women get up on the podium, and they're so ladylike, and they're so nice, and they're so refined, and they give their talk, and they get through, and she says to herself, but did they drink? I got to tell you what I used to be like, what happened, and what I'm like now. And I have to be past the fear of judgment. I don't know about anyone in this room, but I did not drink in a convent. I didn't step on the priest's toe and go, oh my God, I better sign up. I didn't do that. I let my disease take me to the gutter. I had to do what I had to do to get here. And if you can't relate to what I did, where I did it, what I drank, what I used, hopefully you can relate to the feelings, right? I went to the bottom. I stayed there. One time I was speaking at a convention in Seattle, and I was through, and I was happy, and I was at a dance because I had this fundraiser thing or whatever it was. Everybody came up, shook my hand, they were friendly, really nice, and they left. One lady kept circling, waiting till everybody was gone, right? So I knew what she was waiting for. She wanted to make sure I was in a really good mood before she came and gave me her 2 cents worth on my talk. You know, there's always one in every meeting. Dun, 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 dun. You know, they're really looking for the loophole, you know. Let's see if this bitch can take this. Because they want to sit back there and go like this mentally. She doesn't walk like she talks. We forget that she's walking. That's the name. That's the name of this game. That's the name of this game. Some days that's the best it's ever going to get. Some days I just don't take a drink. Hello. And I'm alive. And that's why I'm here. Right? So she comes up to me at the meeting and she goes, I liked your talk, Jeri, but I'm a high bottom drunk. When I looked at her and I said, excuse me, who did your thinking? Did someone else think for you? She missed it. When I came to you people, I lived in a spiritual sewer. It doesn't matter if I was drinking with my family in Woodland Hills at the country club, or if I'm in the Tenderloin of San Francisco drinking with a bunch of street people. I spiritually was the same person. My whole mind, my whole attitude, my whole belief system was this. I, me, and more. That's all I could see. I, me, more. I had absolutely no ability whatsoever to be emotionally honest or emotionally responsible. I could not care about you in my wildest dreams. It was I, me, and more. I lived in a sewer, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. I don't know about anybody else. And through God's grace, when I got here, He just lifted me out of that. I didn't deserve recovery. I didn't ask for recovery. I was given a gift, a moment of clarity. Greatest gift I've ever had. Greatest gift I've ever had. But I had to do what I had to do to get here. I left home a nice valley girl. Right? I hitchhiked and I went to a place in San Francisco called Fillmore. It makes nice, I'll tell you what Fillmore's like. I have a lot of black friends of mine, and they tell me, Jeri, I won't go into Fillmore. They tell me it makes one of the worst neighborhoods in South Central look pretty nice. I gotta get a kick out of them, because they say it right, believe me. So I went to Fillmore, and I hitchhiked with these couple of characters, and I met people I'd never met before in my life. I met pimps, burglars, prostitutes, connections, and I thought to myself, how refreshing. I look back now, I can't believe it. I thought to myself, at least they're honestly dishonest. You know, none of this middle class crap. When you're chit-chatting and the phone rings, you know, and you answer the phone and you go, hi, how are the kids? Oh, fine. I'll be with you in the moment I get my foot off my wife's head. You know, I mean, it was like none of this phony-ass bullshit. And this was in the 60s, so I was looking for that anyhow. I thought, these people are real, right? Bullshit. They had what I wanted. They were always drunk, and they weren't waiting for Christmas. They always had a can of beer in a little paper bag, so you wouldn't know. Chuck talks about that in his book, and it's, to me, the funniest thing. Every time you go down 5th Street, you ever take a look, if you ever get in a wine, now you can go anywhere and see it, and you see somebody with a little paper bag, right? Do you think that they really think someone's driving by and going, is that Pepsi or Diet Pepsi? That's that keen alcoholic mind. So I met all these characters, right? I met people like Fillmore Slim. He would wear alligator shoes, silk suits, sharkskin suits, and rose-colored glasses. They were the kind of people that you asked them what time it was, and they told you how to make a watch. They were always saying, what's happening, man? What's happening, man? What's happening, man? Because no one knew. You know, they didn't know. But they were partying, and they were out of it, and they were cool. And I wanted what they had, period. The only problem is I had to make a living. I didn't have my family's money. I loved to drink. I loved the nice clubs. I loved the nice apartments. I loved beautiful clothes. Everything I wanted, I had to have the best. I think the biggest insult that you can tell me personally as an alcoholic is that you're average. I either had to be the best or the worst. I couldn't settle for anything but the best. I had the best booze, the best jewelry. I mean, I wanted it all, right? One problem, I had to make a living. So I personally entered the oldest profession in the world. It was new to me. I moved uptown to the Tenderloin. I would go from the Tenderloin of San Francisco down to North Beach dressed in basic black like my mother taught me with white pearls. And I wouldn't wear too much makeup so I wouldn't look cheap. Don't tell me there's not a God, because I'm still alive. And I would go and try to lie to some guy, get away with not having to do much, hopefully, and rip him off and split. And a lot of times I could, and a lot of times I couldn't. And I'm living with 2 prostitutes in the Tenderloin of San Francisco, and I would come home at night and tell them that I had been gambling at the Hilton. Because what would they think of me? Now, I personally don't know about anybody else here, but when I was drinking and using, I was never honest. I always had people to see, places to go, and things to do. I do not remember going to the bartender in one of the nice clubs in North Beach and having the bartender look at me and say, "Hi, Jeri, how are you tonight?" Am I looking at the bartender and saying, "Fine, except I hate myself and I'm dying of alcoholism. How are you?" No way. I always had my act together. I had places to go, people to see, and things to do. I didn't want to tell that bartender what I had to do to get the money to sit at the bar to tell him those lies. Total inability to be honest. I lived 2 lives. I would fly home for Thanksgiving and Christmas and change into beautiful Italian knits so I could look like a young Jacqueline Kennedy, come to my family, totally lie about where I lived and what I was doing, and be the nice young lady from Woodland Hills. Give me a break. You don't think they knew? Since I had an attorney on retainer. I got sick of that, so I promoted myself to management in the same profession. A lot more money, a lot easier. This is not outside controversy, but I felt bad for Heidi. I thought to myself, there through the grace of God go I. I could have been there, just a little dope fiend alcoholic, had a good idea. Through God's grace, I'm not there. I'm here tonight instead of a federal prison. I just spoke at a prison where they were like all rapists and murderers. I mean, a real prison. And I had a great time. And here's gangster prisoners with tattoos all over their face. You couldn't even find their face, they had so many tattoos. One guy made Charles Manson look handsome. I mean, the place was unbelievable. And halfway through my sharing, I'm looking down and they're crying. Because they're drunks just like us, because they understand incomprehensible demoralization. The only difference between them and me is they got caught, or they went worse for whatever reason. Maybe they didn't have a loving family, I don't know what the hell they happened, but they're there and I'm here, but not out of virtue. Every time I go by, like my friend Danny says, and he sees one of those LA County buses, he has an instantly good day. Anyhow, I always thought that my problem was you, society, my family, what I did, what I didn't do, that if I shaped up and became a square, I'd be all right. I don't know about any of you. I thought my problem was the police. They were always overreacting. I got pregnant and I thought, now I'm really going to have a good life, right? I'll become a square. I'll move to the country. I'll just drink beer and read the classics. And I'll get a station wagon. I'll become Donna Reed. I mean, who knows? I did move to the country. I moved to Oakland. I got a little apartment. And the reason why I share this, I believe for me, we all have to have that last hurrah, that last time that I really, with everything in me, believe this time is going to be different and I'm going to get my act together. I did it all the time, but this was my final real attempt because I knew this time everything would be different. I'd have a child, I'd have love, I'd have responsibility. I knew I would shape up, right? And I tried. I want you to know I tried. 2 weeks after I had my daughter, I found myself sitting at the Booker T. Washington Hotel. You know? Drinking some Jack Daniels, having a little recreational heroin. And I'm sitting in this funky, dirty-ass hotel room, and I looked over at this old lady, old black dope fiend, and I saw previews of coming attractions, and I saw the Daily Word, a little pamphlet on her nightstand, and it reminded me of my grandmother, because she always read it, and my family. It reminded me of decency. It reminded me of good values, and I started crying. And this old woman looked at me and she said, "You're crying." And I said, "No, I'm not." I wasn't through. I still had pride. It was good Jack Daniels, trust me. Good drugs, but guess what? It did not work. No matter what I drank, I could not get drunk. I could not turn off my head. I was no longer able to escape into fantasy. I knew that I was in that tacky-ass hotel room one more time doing what I didn't want to do. All that happened to me was my magic medicine quit working. That's hell. That's the loneliness only an alcoholic, I believe, knows. When we can't get drunk and we can't get sober. That's hell. I walked through hell. That was a loneliness I cannot even fathom today. I wasn't part of the drinking world, and I wasn't part of the sober world. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was. I could not stop drinking, could not stop using, but it didn't work. Could no longer go out and get drunk and become somebody. A few years earlier, I could be in a tacky-ass little hotel room in San Francisco, drinking Red Mountain wine, listening to a little transistor radio, and 10 minutes later, I'm at the Hilton listening to Hi-Fi. But at the end, I knew where I was, I knew who I was, and I knew what I was doing. That's called incomprehensible demoralization. Couldn't stop. I ran out of everybody. I ran out of people, I ran out of places, I ran out of things. I had nothing but a little housekeeper I used to pay in grass, a little hippie. My daughter was 6 months old. I was never there. I had a nanny. I was facing charges for the umpteenth time. I went out partying one night. And this is my story. If talking about some drugs in my alcoholism story offends you, please pray for me or write an inventory. I don't really care. Dr. Bob talks about his taking dope and sedatives. My first love is booze, but I drank and partied in the 60s, and I would have taken anything to escape me. And this one girl looked at me and she says, "I know what's wrong with you, Jeri. You're a hoodlum. You need to be a hippie like me." She was real spiritual. She went to Stanford University, and she wore beads and things in her hair, and she had a job, for God's sake. She actually worked. I respected that. She was a topless dancer, but she worked. And her name was Frankie. She was a real character, and she said, "You got to get spiritual." So I said, "How do I get spiritual?" And she said, "Well, just take this acid and you'll get spiritual." So I did. I went out that night partying on this acid, and I was so crazy that I was carrying 2 pairs of shoes with me. Not wearing them, carrying them. One wore a pair of sandals because that represented hippies. And then I had these alligator shoes that kind of represented hoods and street people. What I'm trying to tell you is nobody was home. I went out to this after-hour club that I thought all these high rollers went to, and it's the first time I could see what the club looked like. It cost 50 cents to get in. It had red zodiac signs all over the wall. I looked at my friends and they were dancing slow and the music was fast. I looked over at their eyes and they looked like dancing dead fish. I thought, if this is cool, I'm not cool. I looked at Fillmore Slim, Mr. Hip. I looked down at his shoes, $300 shoes, and there was vomit on the end of them. I saw my world. And I went home to have a drink with a friend of mine, because what else do you do? And she looked at me, and she looked good. Her eyes were clear. She was healthy. I hadn't seen her in a while. She was a party animal. I never saw her look so good in my life. I offered her a drink, and she said, "No, thank you." And I said, what's wrong with you? Are you sick? And she says, no. When I was in jail, somebody from Alcoholics Anonymous came and told me drinking and using was my problem. And I don't know about anybody else, but the lights went on. Hello, not intellectually, but down here. Drinking and using is my problem. And this is the greatest gift I've ever been given. Guess what the next thought was? And this had never entered my mind before. It was a belief. It was a knowing. It was this. There is something fundamentally wrong with me, and I must change. It's the first time in my life I didn't blame everybody else. I wasn't in self-pity and self-hatred. I just knew I was sick and I had to change. And I don't know where that gift came from. That's that moment of clarity, that divine grace, when God just picks us up out of the sewer and goes, hi, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. Here's a new life. The miracle of life is my mother had been a sober member of AA for 1 year. So being a big bad hoodlum, I went home and I called my mother. And the miracle of life is I told my mother I was in something I was constitutionally incapable of saying 1 hour earlier. I'm sick, I'm tired, I want to come home, but this was the key. I need help. There was no more of this pride. I didn't tell her how to help me, when to help me, or where to help me. I just needed help. The war was over. I wanted to come home. She said, you get on a plane and you come home. And I took my 6-month-old daughter. I had like 45 cents. I had hepatitis for the 3rd time. And I got on a plane and went home. And I went to a little apartment in Reseda, California. My mother was living with this nut who didn't drink and read a funny big book. His name was Jeri, man. He had 15 years of sobriety. And they picked me up at the airport, and they took me to this little apartment. I was 20 years of age. This was March 15th, 1969. We did not have young people in Alcoholics Anonymous, trust me. I used to go to meetings, and I'd be like this, sick as a dog, and some old-timer would come up to me and say, I'm so glad you got here young before you had to suffer. And I go, thanks. Me too. I've been on a picnic. Nice shade, isn't it? And but anyhow, I'm in this apartment with my mom's house, and I'm kicking everything known to man. And I was sick. I was physically sick. I saw things that weren't there. I heard things. I'm so grateful I didn't see a psychiatrist, because I could have been diagnosed triple polar or whatever they call it nowadays. I was just a little old drunk getting sober, and I was in the apartment sick as a dog, and I was shaking. And I was scared to death to take a Valium because I'd washed it down with a little whiny poo. So I took nothing. And I was there 3 days, sick, sick, sick. But I felt safe. I didn't have to drink, didn't have to be cool, I didn't have to be hip, I could just be sick. So if you're new in AA, enjoy it. It's the only place you can be exactly what you are, new and sick. In AA, it's the only place in the world you get applause for breathing in and out. Trust me. This gentleman right here could walk up to that man right there and say, I robbed a bank today. And he would look at you and go, did you do it sober? And if you said yes, he'll go, good. Now we're going to work on 8 and 9. But you're sober. So I'm sitting at this apartment sick as a dog, and I'm there about 3 days, and I hear a knock on the door. And I open it up. And there's a man with a beard who looked like a drug addict, and this other guy with his nose literally running and shaking. So I slammed the door. I thought, my God, it's the connections. They found me in Reseda. I've been here 3 days, and they found me. They knocked again. I opened it up. The guy with the beard goes with a big smile. Hi, we're from AA. Your mother told us you were in town, and we came to take you to a meeting. And the miracle of life is, I said, come on in. And the other guy was sicker than me. He was like that, and I was like this. So I looked at the guy, and I said, don't worry, man, you can make it. I got 3 days. I gotta hurry this up and close because I'm running late. And that was the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. The guy with the beard was an old-timer. He had 1 year, and his name was Bill Beck, and he was a barber. So every morning he would pick me up and take me to his barber shop. And the black guy too, and we'd sit there in the chairs. That was my recovery, because he told me I couldn't be alone, because if I was alone with myself, I was with bad company. And he wanted to take me to a meeting, but he was afraid to leave me alone all day, so I'd sit in the barber shop. I thought it was a treatment center. What did I know? AAs would come in all day and they go like this, keep coming back. And I go, okay. Where was I going to go? Where was I going to go? I get the biggest kick out of it today. Some AA baby of mine will call me up and go, I got a newcomer here. They want to go to a meeting. Should I take them to Rodeo or the Allanest? And I say, are they breathing? Yes. Just move them. Who cares? If you fall off the Queen Mary in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and your ass is out there and you're surrounded by sharks and you're drowning, right? And some little fishing boat comes by and you go, wait a minute. When they throw you a life raft, you go, wait a minute, I fell off the Queen Mary. If you're drowning, who cares? And that's how I came to you people. Because if I wanted to want what you had, I was 20 years of age. They finally took me to the Allanest, which is my home group, the sickest clubhouse in the West, and I love it. Because if God would have taken me to a nicer meeting, that where the people were so healthy, they might have noticed what I was wearing, who I was, what I looked like, and what I sounded like, and I might be dead today. Thank God they were sick enough not to give a damn about any of that. All they cared about, and just like you in this room tonight, all they cared about was that I didn't drink today. And I went to the Allanest, I'm 20 years of age, and I'm in the back room thinking to myself, Jesus Christ, what trip am I on this time? I'm out in Reseda, California with rednecks and bikers, and they're all 80. I took this drinking too seriously. I had newcomer wisdom. I was beginning to think. Every speaker I started judging. And I remember every afternoon, I don't know if you have him here in one of these meetings, but I had one in my meeting. Every afternoon, this fossil, who was about 70 years of age, with 3 teeth, would shuffle to the podium. He would take forever to get there. And every day I would keep thinking, come on, will he make it? We're going to have a break. This man drove an old Chevy car. He wore polyester pants. He literally had 3 teeth. He could have got a ticket for what he looked like. And he would get up on the podium every afternoon and go like this. If you want what we have. And then smile. I used to think to myself, what's he have? Hasn't anybody told that man he has 3 teeth? Then he would get up like a challenge and he would look at everybody in the room and he would go like this. Are you willing to go to any lengths to get it? And I think to myself, get what? A Chevy and 3 teeth? Polyester pants? I might be new, but I'm not dumb. He pissed me off so bad that I came back every day to see what he had. Guess what he had? He had sobriety. He laughed from his gut. He didn't care what people thought of him. He loved Alcoholics Anonymous. He talked about the 12 and 12. He was happy. He was joyous. He was free. He didn't have to have a drink to get across the street or to socialize. He loved Alcoholics Anonymous. He had 22 years of sobriety, and he was goosed with the Spirit. He didn't have just the words. He had the music. And I wanted what he had, and I asked him to be my sponsor. And there was only one problem. I didn't realize he was rude. He used to hit me on the head and tell me a drunk monkey could think better than I could. And he was right. And he helped me get through all 12 steps. And I also had a woman sponsor with 3 years because she was an interpreter. I couldn't understand this guy. It was just way on beyond me. I would go to this man with serious problems, and he would tell me, I don't want to hear it, write it. No sense at all. You know, I wish I wouldn't have gone so long what it used to be like, but the bottom line is I'm 28 years sober. You know, I have a fabulous business. I just came back from Europe. I was there 10 days. Mediterranean cruise, my company sent me. My daughter's 29 years of age. She's never had to see me drunk. I've never in my sobriety had to go to bed with somebody I won't have lunch with. I don't go to jail. I'm free. I have a good relationship. I have bad days in my sobriety, just like when I was a newcomer. The only difference between being an old timer and a newcomer is I'll sum it up like this. When I was a newcomer, if I had a flat tire, I called suicide prevention. Because if I had a flat tire always happened to me. And if I had a flat tire, that means I couldn't get to work. And And if I couldn't get to work, I couldn't pay the rent. And if I couldn't pay the rent, I'd be kicked out. And then I'd be living on the damn street, and screw the AA meeting. That was a flat tire. With 28 years of sobriety, I get a flat tire and I go like this. Oh, I'll call the automobile club. It's a flat tire. Cars have tires. Tires get flat. Guess what? It has nothing to do with me. The greatest freedom in Alcoholics Anonymous is the ability not to think everything revolves around you. God's not out on a cloud pointing his finger at me and saying, I think I'll have give Jeri a really crappy day today. Oh boy, I got nothing better to do than screw her day up. That's crap. God's inside of me, always has been, always will be. God's all love, always has been, always will be. The 12 steps help me uncover, discover, and discard the crap that keeps me away from myself and God and you. That's all. It's taken me years of inventory, surrender, working with newcomers, coming to a meeting tonight like this with people that want to go home and go to sleep. Me too. It's taken years for me to get to the point that life is just life and that life happens. And the more I resist it, the more it's going to persist. I have two choices in recovery. I can accept the things I cannot change, which is everybody and everything, or I can have the courage to change the things I can. I believe for me in sobriety, it's harder to have the courage to change the things you can. Because acceptance, we're forced to accept. What are we going to do about it anyhow? When life doesn't go my way, when things happen horribly, like my mother was in and out of this program for years. I adored my mother. She was my Eskimo. She had 50-some days of sobriety. She was kicking non-habit-forming antidepressants for the 10th time. And she had a little drinky poo and died that day of a heart attack. And I was able to get there to the emergency room and be there, but it was like that. That's life, unexpected life, and it was horrible for me, but AA was there and God was there, right? You have no choice but to accept those things. But you can be depressed, you can be angry, you can turn blue, you can have a spiritual temper tantrum, and life's going to go on. So eventually we have to surrender, give up, and accept. But it's harder for me to have courage to change the things I can, because that means I have to take a positive action to be good to myself. Ugh, what an order. Courage. And in sobriety, we eventually learn, what can I accept, what can I change? But the greatest gift is I don't spend 24 hours a day taking my emotional pulse and suffering from the disease of I, me, and more. I no longer live in a psychic sewer because of people like you and people like my sponsor and all the people that came before me. I've been given the gift of sobriety, which is the gift of self-forgetting. Thank you for letting me share.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.